The raven was the first to see it. Perched silently on a weathered post, its black eyes reflected the harsh sun of a western town where dust never settled and hearts were harder than stone. The bird's wings shifted restlessly, as though it knew what the townsfolk had already decided, that the Apache woman did not belong here. Her name was Alona. Her braids framed a face carved with strength, yet softened by a sorrow that seemed too heavy for one soul. She walked down the center of the street, her long black dress brushing against the dirt. Every porch whispered against her presence. Every stare carried judgment. And behind her, keeping step with silent defiance, was the cowboy. His name was James Callahan, a man who had known loss, who had ridden through wars of men and wars of his own heart. He wasn't a hero by choice. But when he saw Alona that day, abandoned by her tribe and condemned by the town, something inside him shifted. The raven tilted its head as James moved closer to her. He knew the price of standing by her side. In a land where prejudice ran deeper than the wells, a cowboy defending an Apache woman was a man signing away his peace. But peace had never fed his soul anyway.
"Walk with me," James said quietly, his voice steady though the crowd pressed in with eyes sharp as daggers. Alona did not answer, but her silence was not refusal. It was trust. And that trust felt heavier to him than the revolver at his side.
The townsfolk murmured. One man spit in the dust. Another shook his head as though the sight was unbearable. Yet James did not falter. He chose her over them.
And the raven watched. But this story, like the bird's gaze, stretched further than that street.
Miles away, in a sprawling mansion of glass and steel, a billionaire woman named Clara Whitmore had just returned from the city. Her life was built on transactions, signatures, and silence in places where laughter should have been. She had everything the world valued, yet every evening, as she opened her door, the emptiness screamed louder than her wealth. But that day was different. Because when she stepped into her backyard, she froze. There, by the water tube in the garden, the janitor's son, barefoot, no older than 10, was splashing wildly, laughter erupting like fireworks in the quiet estate. His father, the janitor she'd passed 100 times without noticing, sat beside him, dipping his hands in the water, chuckling softly. It was a simple sight. Too simple, perhaps, for a woman who lived among marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Yet in that moment, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years: life. The boy noticed her, froze, then scrambled to his feet, stammering apologies as if joy itself was a crime. His father lowered his head, shame painting his face. But Clara only whispered, "No, don't stop." Her voice trembled because she realized, these two, with nothing to their name but laughter and love, had more wealth than she had ever known. And in that instant, her story bent toward theirs. She walked barefoot to the water tube, knelt down, and dipped her hand into the cool stream. For the first time in decades, she laughed, not the polite echo she gave at galas, but the raw, unguarded kind that heals. The janitor looked at her in disbelief. "Ma'am," he started, but she shook her head. "No," she said softly. "Today, I am not your employer. Today, I am just a woman who forgot what happiness feels like." And the boy, still nervous, grinned wide as she splashed water back at him. It was kindness, small, ordinary, yet world-changing. The moment rewrote the silence inside her. Back in the western town, James's choice to stand with Alona echoed the same truth. He had nothing to gain, everything to lose. But by choosing compassion over judgment, he gained something greater: humanity. The raven, still watching, flapped its wings and rose into the sky as if it too understood. Sometimes, the smallest act of defiance, the simplest act of kindness, is enough to rewrite a life. Alona's lips curved, just barely, into the ghost of a smile. Clara's laughter spilled into the air of her lonely mansion. And James walked forward, hand steady at Alona's back, past a town too blind to see what love could do. In the end, it was never about wealth, or power, or the approval of the crowd. It was about the courage to choose people over prejudice, kindness over cruelty, and love over silence. And that, the raven knew, was the only story worth watching. The raven sat upon the weathered post, its dark wings folded close as though it already understood the weight of what was about to unfold. In the dust of the western street, where whispers of judgment traveled faster than the wind, the Apache woman walked alone. Her name was Alona. Her braids swung gently against her shoulders, her black dress carried the threads of tradition, and her eyes told the story of 1,000 hardships. The townsfolk stared from shaded porches, their faces a mixture of disdain and curiosity. She was a stranger here, not by her own choosing, but because both her people and this town had branded her unworthy of belonging. Behind her, steady and unafraid, came James Callahan. A cowboy with sunburnt skin, a worn hat, and eyes that had seen more loss than most men could endure. He had nothing to gain by walking beside her, but everything to lose. Yet when the moment arrived, when silence could have been safety, he chose to break it. "Walk with me," he said softly. His voice carried not just to her ears, but into the hearts of every man and woman watching from the porches. Alona did not answer with words. Her silence was not refusal. It was trust. The air grew heavy as they moved together down the street. A man spat into the dirt, another shook his head, a woman muttered beneath her breath. The town had already passed judgment, but James refused to bow to it. He chose her, and in that choice was defiance, was courage, was something greater than himself. The raven tilted its head, as if bearing witness to a story that would not be forgotten. Miles away, another story unfolded, though its walls were made of marble instead of wood and its silence was richer, yet just as cruel. Clara Whitmore returned to her home, a vast estate that glittered with everything money could buy, yet lacked the warmth of a single heartbeat. She had climbed every mountain of wealth and power, but at the top she found nothing but loneliness. That afternoon, when she opened the door to her backyard, she saw something that stopped her breath. The janitor's young son, barefoot and laughing, splashed in the water tube.
His father, the man who had cleaned her halls unnoticed for years, knelt beside him, his hands playing in the stream as though it was the finest treasure in the world. Their laughter was unpolished, raw, real. And it struck Clara harder than any fortune she had ever counted. The boy froze when he saw her, eyes wide. Laughter cut short as though happiness itself was forbidden in her presence. His father bowed his head, already preparing for dismissal, for shame. But Clara whispered, almost to herself, "No, don't stop." Her voice shook because she realized in that moment she had been starving. Not for food, not for wealth, but for life itself. She stepped forward, slipped off her shoes, and knelt beside them. The cool water kissed her fingers as she reached into the stream. And when the boy laughed again, it was joined by her own. It wasn't the careful, polite laugh she had given in boardrooms or galas. It was unguarded, it was healing. The janitor tried to speak, to apologize, but she stopped him. "No," she said softly. "Today, I am not your employer. Today, I am only a woman who forgot what happiness feels like." And in that moment, the roles of rich and poor, employer and worker, melted away. They were just people, bound by the simplest truth. That kindness, even in the smallest form, could rebuild a broken soul. The raven in the western town spread its wings and took flight, the echo of its cry stretching far beyond the dusty street. Alona walked with James, the weight of judgment still heavy but no longer hers to carry alone. Clara laughed with the janitor's son, and the sound filled the hollow mansion like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Two worlds apart, yet both carried the same truth. It is not wealth, nor status, nor the approval of others that defines us. It is the courage to choose people over prejudice, compassion over cruelty, and love over silence. And in that choice lies the only story worth remembering.